Okay, real talk. I wasn't even going to make this video because honestly, I wasn't sure people were ready to hear what I'm about to say. But then I started paying attention, and I mean really paying attention, to the guy who just walked away from a $90,000 a year job with nothing lined up, to the nurse who worked 14-hour shifts for 3 years straight, and one Tuesday morning just didn't show up anymore, to the family that sold everything, the house, the cars, 2 incomes, packed into a van and drove away from a life that looked perfect from the outside. And I started asking them all the same question: why did you leave? And every single one of them, without hesitation, gave me the same answer. Not the same words, but the same answer. And when I finally understood what that answer actually meant, I realized something that changed the way I see this entire country. America is not breaking down. It's being quietly abandoned. And today I'm counting down 7 signs that prove this is already happening, right now, at a scale that will absolutely floor you. I need you to stay until number 1, because number 1 is not just a sign. It is a timer, and it is already counting down. Let's go. Number 7, the resignation that never stopped. All right, so let's start here, because this is where most people think the story begins and ends. You remember the Great Resignation, right? Everybody quitting, everybody talking about work-life balance and quiet quitting and all of that. The media covered it for about 6 months, then moved on to the next thing. And here's what they never came back to tell you. It never stopped. 47 million Americans quit their jobs in 2021 alone. That number, 47 million. Let that sit for a second. That's not a trend. That's a movement. But here's the part that nobody talks about. A huge chunk of those people didn't go find another job. They just stopped. No backup plan. No side hustle waiting. No offer letter in their inbox. They looked at their lives, really looked, and decided that whatever came next had to be better than what they were doing. Now you might be thinking, okay, that's just burnout. People get burned out. That's not new. And you'd be right if that's where it stopped. But it didn't stop there. It got deeper. It got more personal. And number 6 is where it starts getting uncomfortable. Because number 6 is about something Americans have believed in for generations. Something that's been handed down from parent to child like a sacred promise. And that promise? It just got broken. Number 6, the dream they stopped dreaming. Let me ask you something personal. Growing up, did someone in your family tell you that if you worked hard enough, one day you'd own your own home? I'm willing to bet the answer is yes. Because that's the deal. That's always been the deal in America. Work hard, save up, buy your piece of the country, build equity, pass it on. That deal is dead for millions of Americans right now. And I'm not talking about people who gave up too easily. I'm talking about people running 2 incomes, budgeting obsessively, doing everything they were told, and still watching homeownership drift further away every single year. Mortgage rates that make the monthly payment on a modest home look like a luxury car payment. Home prices that went up 40, 50, 60% in some cities in just a few years. And wages that just didn't keep up. So what are millions of them doing? They're choosing van life, tiny homes, co-living, renting indefinitely. Some are leaving the country entirely, not as a lifestyle choice, as a survival calculation. And here's the part that really gets me. These aren't people who stopped wanting a home. These are people who stopped believing they deserve to want one. That shift from, I can't afford it yet, to this was never actually meant for me. That is a completely different kind of giving up. And it leads directly into number 5. Because number 5 is where this stops being about property and starts being about something so much more intimate, it's almost painful to say out loud. Don't go anywhere. Number 5. The children they decided not to have. This one hit me differently when I started researching it. America's birth rate just hit the lowest point in modern history. Now, before you assume you know why, let me stop you. Because the researchers went out and actually asked. They asked young Americans, people in their 20s and 30s, why they're not having kids. And the answer was not, I don't want children. The number 1 answer was, I love children. I just cannot afford to protect one. Read that back slowly. These are not selfish people. These are not people who don't care. These are people who sat down, ran the numbers, childcare, healthcare, housing, education, and arrived at the most heartbreaking conclusion imaginable. That bringing a child into the life they're currently living would be an act of cruelty, not love. Now, when a generation of Americans starts making that calculation, not one or two people, but millions of them, you're not looking at a personal choice anymore. You're looking at a civilization sending itself a distress signal. And I need you to feel the weight of that before we move on. Because the people making that choice are not cold. They're not broken. They're exhausted. And they're paying attention. Which brings us perfectly to number 4. Because number 4 is the psychological reason behind all of this. The invisible thing happening inside people's minds that most of us never talk about. And once I explain it, everything on this list is going to suddenly make perfect, terrifying sense. Do not click away. Number 4. The invisible trap millions of Americans are already in. Okay, so I want to tell you about something that psychologists discovered decades ago, and I promise this is going to connect everything. There was a series of experiments done on learned helplessness. The basic finding was this: when a living thing is repeatedly exposed to a situation where nothing it does changes the outcome, it eventually stops trying altogether. Not because it's weak, not because it's given up in a dramatic way, but because its brain, its rational brain, has concluded that effort and outcome are no longer connected. And here is where I need you to really hear me. That is exactly what has happened to millions of Americans. Think about the pattern. They voted. The promises weren't kept. They worked harder. The gap got wider. They saved more. The cost of living rose faster. They followed every piece of advice the system gave them and still fell behind. So the brain did what brains do. It ran the calculation one more time, weighed the energy required to keep going against the realistic probability of a different result. And it came back with one word: stop. And they stopped, quietly, without drama, without a speech. They just disengaged. And here's what makes this so critical to understand right now. This isn't affecting the margins. This isn't a small percentage of people who couldn't handle the pressure. This is a mass psychological event happening across an entire nation. And the consequences of it are already showing up everywhere, in ways that most people haven't connected yet, which is exactly what number 3 is about. Because number 3 is where this leaves the world of feelings and psychology and walks straight into the physical, real-world collapse of things you depend on every single day. And once you see this, you can't unsee it. Number 3. The collapse hiding in plain sight. Let me paint you a picture. Your child's school has had 3 different teachers this year because nobody is staying. You went to the emergency room last month and waited 6 hours because they're running on half their normal nursing staff. You ordered something online and it took 3 weeks because there aren't enough drivers. Sound familiar? Most people look at these things as separate, unrelated inconveniences. They are not separate. They are not unrelated. They are the visible symptoms of the same invisible disease. The people who built this country, the teachers, the nurses, the drivers, the tradespeople, are leaving their posts. Not because they found something better, because they hit their limit. A teacher with 18 years of experience walked in her classroom one morning, looked at 34 kids she genuinely loved, and realized she had nothing left to give them. She turned in her badge that afternoon. A nurse who worked double shifts through an entire pandemic, who watched people die alone because of visitor restrictions, finally asked for 1 week off to recover. She was denied. She never went back. These are not lazy people. These are not ungrateful people. These are the backbone of America, and the backbone just snapped. And what really gets me, is that the institutions losing these people never saw it coming, because they assumed that dedication was infinite. That loyalty had no breaking point. They were catastrophically wrong. But here's the twist that I did not see coming when I started researching this video. Because number 2 is not about people falling apart. Number 2 is about people rising up, just not in the way anyone expected. And honestly, number 2 might be the most surprising thing in this entire video. Number 2, the underground America being built right now. Okay, so here's where this story takes a turn that nobody talks about. Because when I said people are leaving, I didn't mean they're disappearing. I mean they're building something else. Right now, today, There's an entire parallel America being constructed quietly in rural counties, in small towns, in communities you've probably never heard of. People growing their own food, generating their own power, homeschooling their children, trading goods and services with their neighbors without a dollar changing hands. People who looked at a system that kept failing them, and instead of waiting for it to be fixed, said, "Fine, watch what we build without you." And here's the thing that genuinely surprised me about these people when I looked into their lives. They're not angry. I expected to find rage, bitterness, a survivalist mentality driven by fear. What I found instead was something that honestly made me a little envious. They seemed free, like people who set down an incredibly heavy bag they've been carrying for so long they forgot it wasn't supposed to be there. They're not wealthy. They're not living lavishly. But ask them if they want to go back, and the answer is always the same. Go back to what? And that question, that quiet, peaceful, completely serious question, is what leads us directly to number one. Because number one is the reason none of the other 6 numbers on this list will ever fully be fixed. It is the deepest wound, the one underneath everything else. And if you've been watching this entire video, you need to see this. Number one, they stopped believing the future is worth fighting for. I want you to think back to your parents' generation for a second, or your grandparents, whoever raised you. Did they believe, genuinely, in their bones, that your life was going to be better than theirs? Because that belief, that quiet, unshakable conviction that the next generation would have more, do more, be more, that was the engine. That was the thing that made people endure. The long hours, the sacrifice, the patience, the delayed gratification. All of it was powered by one thing, the belief that it was building towards something. And now, for the first time in American history, surveys show that the majority of Americans no longer believe their children will have a better life than they did. Not a vocal minority, not the cynics, not the fringe, the majority. And I need you to understand what that actually means, because it goes so much deeper than a poll number. Hope is not a feeling. Hope is a fuel. It is what makes people plant trees they'll never sit under, build businesses that take 10 years to pay off, stay in a hard marriage and work through it, keep showing up to a job that doesn't respect them, because maybe next year will be different. When hope runs out, people stop building. They stop planting. They stop sacrificing. They stop waiting for next year. And that is precisely what we are watching right now. Not a dramatic revolution, not a collapse you can point to on a specific date. Just millions of people, one by one, making a quiet, private decision. I am done waiting for a future that was promised to me and never delivered. And they are leaving. Not loudly, not angrily, just leaving. So here's where I land after going deep on all of this. 7 signs, 7 different angles, 7 different ways of saying the same thing. America is not collapsing from the outside. It is being quietly vacated from the inside. And the people doing the leaving are not the weak ones. They are not the failures. In a lot of ways, they might be the most clear-eyed people in the room, because they looked at the situation honestly, without the spin, without the false hope, without the just work harder and it'll get better messaging, and they made a decision based on reality. And that is what I want to ask you right now. Not what you think about politics, not what side you're on, just this, honestly, from where you're sitting right now. Do you still believe the system can be fixed? Or somewhere deep down, have you already started making your exit plan? Because based on everything I just showed you, I think more people are going to answer that question one way than the other. And I think that answer is going to surprise a lot of people. Tell me in the comments. For real, no judgment here. Because if the comments section on my last video taught me anything, it's that the most honest conversations in America right now are not happening on the news. They're happening right here. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who's been feeling this but couldn't put it into words. This video might be exactly what they've been waiting for. I'll see you in the next one.